Checker Hughes and Norm Smith, between them, coached Melbourne to 10 of its 12 premierships and guided the club through 565 games. No club can boast their equal. Melbourne had looked to playing coaches in the 20s and early 30s with first Albert Chadwick and then Ivor Warren Smith at the helm. But in 1933 lured Francis Vane Hughes across Yarra Park from Richmond, where he'd taken the Tigers to the 1933 flag. The Fuchsias became demons and Melbourne would be transformed into one of the great power sides of the generation. With skipper Alan LaFontaine leading his men on field and the wily Hughes producing the game plan, Melbourne would return to the top with youngsters of the calibre of Norm Smith and his cricketing teammate Ron Baggett.
I reckon the greatest of the lot is Norm Smith. Norm Smith and I both started playing our football in the paddock, in the paddock in Northcote. And I got a game in the seconds, and I think Norm might have played a game too in 35.
Hughes would discover one of the game's greats in future Australian Football Hall of Famer Jack Mueller, who would play the first of his then club record 216 games in 1934 and win the first of his 3 best and fairests 2 years later. He moulded the young Percy Beams into one of football's most dangerous rovers. Beams would become the first Demon to play 200 games, was amongst Melbourne's best in all 3 wartime premierships and took over as coach when Hughes stood down after the hat-trick in 1941. After Beams took up his role as sports writer at The Age, Hughes returned for another 4 years and masterminded the epic drawn grand final and replay win over Essendon in 1948. Norm Smith would go to Fitzroy as coach after missing out on the Melbourne job, but 3 times a premiership captain, Alan LaFontaine would not enjoy the same success during his 3 seasons as coach. Smith returned in 1952, inherited a side that had won the wooden spoon and set about building a dynasty.
LaFontaine started in 1951. We played 19 first-year players in 1951 and won the wooden spoon, and LaFontaine finished. Reformations never get their due reward. Jim Cardwell was secretary then, that was his first year too. But then Norman came back and he nurtured these players and we got a few more. But it really started in 1951. We were in the finals in 50 with all the pre-war players. Mueller came back and Cole McLean, Shane McGrath, and he cleaned them all out. That's where it started from.
Youngsters like Frank Bluey Adams would become part of the greatest era in football.
I've found on a few occasions that, Smithy could make a criticism of a player and that was it, but if you made the same criticism of that player to Smithy, you in turn got verbally belted up.
Smithy was, as Terry Gleeson said, he's hard and just. A hard and just but hey, he was hard, but he was just a bloody good bloke too.
The overall thought I've got of Norman Smith is the amount of respect that man commanded was absolutely staggering, and I think there was a reason there, and the reason was that there wouldn't have been anything that Norman Smith wouldn't have asked you to have done that he wouldn't have been prepared to do himself had he been playing, and that sort of came across time and time again. And the other point was that any decision that Norman Smith made was always in the best interest of the Melbourne Football Club.
307 games over 16 seasons at a strike rate of 64% and 6 premierships from 8 grand finals was not enough for Smith to keep his job.
My reactions to Norm are no different from anyone else's. It was a real education to play under him as a coach. He made the rules and he enforced them, and you can't ask for a straighter deal on that. It makes playing pretty easy when you know exactly where you're going and you accept what's said. And most of the players that I've played with down there were willing to do this, and this is, I think, the reason for our success over the years. The fact that no matter whether you thought he was good or bad or making mistakes or the best in the world, you still did what he said. And if players don't do this with a coach, no matter who he is, well, you will not have success.
Smith would return, but the magic had gone. In the 3 years ahead, Melbourne would finish no higher than 7th, and in an attempt to reignite the passion, blooded 39 fresh faces. In 1967, Smith would stand down. The dapper back pocket and dual premiership captain John Beckwith took the job, only the sixth to have held the role of Melbourne coach in 35 years. Beckwith too would try for youth, with 35 players introduced over his 3 years. In 1969, the club won the wooden spoon for the first time since 1951. Five-time premiership hero Ian Ridley would be given the onerous task of lifting the club.
But purely and simply, I think, Peter, that our confidence is down at the moment, our teamwork is missing, and this is what we've got to get back. If we can get it back, we've still got a good chance.
After 3 years, he would be replaced by the first outsider since Hughes back in 1933. Bobby Skilton, South Melbourne's triple Brownlow medalist, who'd come close to playing with Melbourne as a youngster, was employed to stop the rot. From wooden spooners in 1974, he came within a whisker of taking Melbourne into the finals in 1976.
I've had 20 years now, and personally have enjoyed them immensely. Had more disappointments than success, because there's nothing succeeds like team success. You're in the game to win, and if you don't win, then you never get used to the bitter end of losing.
After short stints from former premiership player Dennis Jones and playing coach Carl Ditterich, the Melbourne faithful were mesmerised with the news that Ron Barassi was returning, and he was working on a 5-year plan to put Melbourne back into September.
We'll start with the material that's there. I mean, all the other sections of the club whose responsibility it is to bring additional talent, they'll be going flat out. But until that additional talent arrives, if it arrives, we've just got to work with the material we have. But that's okay. I mean, I just have a little feeling that there are some things the players have to learn, particularly about team football. And part of the job of a coach is to teach. I'll be doing that.
There would be innovation. Melbourne spread its recruiting wings as far as Ireland, and Barassi and his hand-picked team added an air of professionalism and pride to the club. And plenty of fire.
Hello? Healy off, Ellingworth on. Bloody weak as piss. I mean, don't look at me like that. How many kicks have you got? That's the answer to everything. Possessions. You give me possessions and I'll shut up.
We'll bring you up to date on those. Look at that bit of a dish-up between Zantuck and Jarrett.
That's unbelievable. Zantuck and Barassi are having a go. The players are pushing Zantuck away from him. Barassi's white down there in the face, but they had a real go, and I'm not kidding. The players had to push Zantuck away. He's wanting to go back and have a go at him again.
However, for the first time in his career, Barassi would taste the ignominy of a wooden spoon in his first year of 1981. In 5 years, the much-vaunted plan produced only 33 victories, no finals, and a highest ladder placing of 8th.
And you played as though you're scared of getting bruised on Sunday. I know you weren't, but that's how bloody well looked. And we had to come back and sit in that plane with egg over our faces.
Former Richmond Premiership forward John Northey was a low-key appointment after the heady years of Barassi and co, but his ability to bond his men paid quick dividends. In 1987, Melbourne rose 8 places and found themselves in the finals after a 23-year drought. There would be night premiership success. In 1988, Northey took his young demons, under new skipper Greg Healy, from 5th place on the ladder into the grand final.
Hawthorn in 88 and through that whole era, as we all know, were just phenomenal. So you never go into a game thinking that you're not going to win. Robbie Flower said it tonight. Yes, you go in every game, you believe you can win. But I think, we did literally run out of legs.
Over his 167-game stint, Northey would take Melbourne into 13 finals. Only Smith, with 23, had achieved greater success. Tiger tough man Neil Baum would replace Northey in 1993 after considerable success in Adelaide. Over nearly 5 seasons, Baum would have one standout year. In 1994, the Demons won through to the preliminary final, the outstanding performance being the 10-goal haul from Gary Lyon in the 79-point semi-final win over Footscray. In 1996, Melbourne slumped to 14th as the merger talks ignited fury among the club's faithful. And in 1997, the writing was on the wall as Melbourne slipped to 16th.
No, I can only do I do and be who I am. I mean, if that's no good, well, that's okay.
As the siren sounds, so there is a big win for the Melbourne Football Club.
Former player Greg Hutchison stepped in, achieved instant success in his first game, but at season's end, new president Joseph Gutnick was looking for a new coach. Enter Neil Danaher. Only Smith and Hughes have coached Melbourne in more games than the former Essendon captain. His 10 seasons and 223 games were highlighted by a grand final tilt in 2000. Ironically, Melbourne would be confronted with the red-hot Essendon. From that first season in 1998, Danaher would take the Demons into 6 final series. But as the club slumped again in 2007, Danaher decided it was time to make way for fresh blood. Mark Riley would take over briefly before the incumbent Dean Bailey arrived from South Australia.